January 29th, 1945. Late afternoon. The light is already failing over a small Belgian village whose name most maps barely bother to mark. Snow clings to the edges of broken stone walls and collapsed roofs, packed hard by boots that have passed too many times in too many directions. 18 American soldiers stand in the open, disarmed, surrounded. In front of them are German infantrymen, dozens at first glance, rifles leveled, faces gray with cold and exhaustion. The count matters. The Americans are outnumbered more than 10 to 1. That math does not bend. Somewhere not far from here, prisoners have already been shot. Everyone on both sides knows it. Orders have been given in this war that leave little room for interpretation. A German submachine gun is pressed hard into the stomach of one of the Americans, close enough that he can feel the metal through his layers of winter clothing. The man holding it is young, tense, waiting for something. An order, a nod, a moment. The American officer looks at him, then past him, taking in the line of rifles, the spread of boots in the snow, the way men stand when they expect an ending. Then, unexpectedly, he laughs. Not loudly, not hysterically, just a short, sharp sound that does not belong in this moment. No one understands it. No one asks why. The second stretches. This is the moment when survival statistics reach zero. This is where the story should stop. He was born into a country already struggling to breathe. The Great Depression did not announce itself with drama. It arrived quietly, in empty cupboards, in worn shoes passed down one more time, in parents who spoke less and worked more. Responsibility came early. There was no room for indulgence or softness. If something broke, you fixed it. If work needed doing, you did it without waiting to be asked. Ambition was a luxury. Survival was the baseline. He learned to measure effort carefully, to conserve energy, to endure discomfort without complaint, because complaining did not change outcomes. School was something to be completed, not romanticized. Jobs were taken because they were available, not because they were inspiring. He learned how to watch people, how to understand what was expected without being told. This was not heroism, it was adaptation. By the time the country began pulling itself out of economic collapse, he was already shaped by years of quiet pressure. When the war came, it did not feel like a rupture. It felt like escalation. Another system demanding more, offering little explanation and punishing weakness. He did not chase glory. He volunteered because it was required, because it made sense, because it was the next hard thing that needed doing. The habits formed in lean years, endurance, restraint, attention, came with him. He chose the airborne because it was harder. That distinction mattered. Airborne units asked for volunteers, then tried to break them. Training weeks were measured precisely. Weeks of running until legs failed, of jumping from towers that simulated the terror of empty air, of drills designed to induce panic and punish hesitation. Washout rates were brutal. Men quit or were cut every week. Fear was not abstract. It lived in the body, tight chests, shaking hands, nausea before jumps. He learned how fear behaved, how it spiked and receded, how it could be managed if acknowledged but not indulged. Jump school did not reward emotion. It rewarded control. From 250 feet up, hesitation was not philosophical, it was lethal. The body learned before the mind caught up. By the end, the jump wings were not symbols. They were proof of exposure survived. Weeks of conditioning rewired responses. Stress no longer meant paralysis. It meant narrowing focus. That mattered later. Normandy tested everything at once. The jump came low and fast, aircraft skimming the hedgerows, flak ripping holes through the night. He hit the ground wrong, pain blooming immediately, sharp and insistent. There was no time to assess it. Men were scattered, units dissolved on impact. He gathered whoever he could find, counted heads, checked weapons, and moved. Movement mattered more than perfection. For 10 days they navigated through unfamiliar terrain. Fields, forests, villages that watched them silently. He led while injured, not because it was inspirational, but because someone had to decide when to move and when to stop. 40 miles passed under their boots. German patrols were avoided or engaged as necessary. No one was lost. That number mattered. 0 casualties was not luck. It was discipline layered on caution, layered on resolve. Holland raised the stakes again. Market Garden was already unraveling when they arrived. German anti-aircraft guns pinned down movement, freezing progress. He saw the position, measured the distance, counted the men with him. 3 Americans against roughly 20 Germans. Waiting meant being shelled. Moving meant exposure. He chose movement. The attack was fast, violent, decisive. Grenades, rifle fire, confusion. When it ended, the guns were silent. Silence was the only metric that counted. The lesson reinforced itself. Aggression, correctly timed, could collapse superior numbers. Then came Malmedy. The news moved faster than orders. American prisoners executed in the snow. No battlefield ambiguity, no crossfire, men disarmed and shot. The facts spread through units without commentary. Something shifted, not rage, clarity. Surrender no longer meant safety. It meant probability. An informal rule took hold, unspoken but understood. Capture was no longer an ending anyone trusted. From that point forward, certain decisions became fixed. This was not a vow. It was an adjustment to reality. By the time January came, by the time winter hardened everything it touched, the idea of laying down arms had already died. The laughter in that Belgian village was not madness. It was recognition. The snow had not stopped falling. It had only thinned, turning from flakes into a fine grit that hung in the air and settled into every crease of clothing and stone. Holtzheim was no longer a village so much as a collection of shattered structures connected by churned paths of mud and ice. The men moving through it were no longer a full rifle company. They were what remained: clerks, drivers, radio operators who now carried rifles they had trained with only briefly. Weeks of fighting had hollowed the unit out, leaving numbers on a roster that no longer matched faces in the line. Everyone was tired in the same way, beyond complaint, beyond adrenaline. Cold was constant. Hunger was background noise. Orders were followed because stopping to question them took more energy than anyone had left. Houses were cleared one by one, doors kicked in, rooms searched, stairwells covered. The work was methodical, slow, and necessary. German resistance had thinned, but it had not vanished. Every building still carried uncertainty. The village had been taken, not secured. That distinction mattered. Prisoners were gathered as they emerged, hands raised, weapons dropped, expressions ranging from relief to calculation. The count rose quickly. 18 Germans, then more. They were moved to an open area under guard. The guards were few, too few. Men were pulled away to continue clearing structures because the job was not finished and manpower did not exist in surplus. No one liked the arrangement, but nothing else was available. The assumption was simple: the prisoners would remain prisoners. They had surrendered. That assumption was the last fragile safety net, and it snapped quietly. A German patrol entered the village from another direction, moving with confidence, appearing to belong. They spoke quickly, decisively. Weapons were reissued. The balance inverted in seconds. The Americans who had been guarding now stood disarmed, confused, clustered together. It was not betrayal. It was momentum. One side pressed an advantage the other could not counter in time. He came around the corner and saw it all at once. Disarmed men, German rifles leveled, familiar faces now exposed. The count recalculated instantly. The terrain offered nothing, no cover, no distance. The situation collapsed into a single fact: capture was complete. A German officer stepped forward, young. Clean uniform, an MP-40 held low but ready. The barrel pressed into his stomach, firm enough to leave no doubt. Around them, the air felt thick. Conversations elsewhere in the village seemed impossibly distant. Boots shifted. Fingers tightened on triggers. This was not a standoff. It was a pause before resolution. And then he laughed. It was not loud, it did not echo, it simply broke the expected pattern. Heads turned. The officer hesitated. The sound did not match the posture of surrender. For a fraction of a second, nothing made sense. The German infantryman looked to the officer. The officer looked back at the man in front of him. The laughter stopped as quickly as it had started, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind it. Seconds stretched. No one moved. That hesitation was the opening, though no one recognized it yet. His hands moved slowly, deliberately. The motion was visible, not rushed. The German officer read it incorrectly, assuming surrender, assuming compliance. The rifle came free. The movement had been practiced thousands of times. Sling loosened, stock shouldered, safety disengaged. The first shot landed before comprehension spread through the group. The officer went down. The second shot followed immediately, then another. The sound was sharp, close, overwhelming in the confined space. Confusion rippled outward. Some Germans froze, others fired wildly. Commands were shouted in overlapping bursts. He fired until the magazine ran dry, reloaded without looking, hands operating independently of conscious thought. Targets were chosen not emotionally, but spatially, closest, clearest, most immediate threat. The world narrowed to front sight and trigger pull. The 60 seconds that followed did not feel like a minute. They unfolded as a sequence of actions, each complete before the next began. Germans fell, some ran, some dropped their weapons. Others tried to regroup and were cut down mid-command. The noise was deafening, then suddenly less so as resistance collapsed. When it ended, the ground was littered with bodies and discarded rifles. 18 Germans were down. The remaining surrendered again, this time without illusion. Silence returned, broken only by labored breathing and the distant sound of fighting elsewhere. Afterward, there was no speech, no celebration. Prisoners were marched away, disarmed properly this time. A report was filed, factual and restrained. A medal citation would later summarize the event in language that flattened its chaos into clarity. The words would be formal, impersonal. They would speak of gallantry and leadership under fire. They would not mention laughter. They would not capture the cold or the hesitation or the way probability had been defied by seconds of decision. Years later, a president would place a medal and offer a handshake, and the moment would pass quietly. What remained was not the killing, but the refusal. The decision not to accept the ending offered. The question lingers, unanswered and uncomfortable. Faced with the same math, what would you have done?